In early October 2017, something strange happened on one of Islamshahr's streets. A woman in a very disheveled state and unaware of her surroundings was staggering in the road. Her legs no longer had the strength to walk. After going a little further, she suddenly collapsed in front of one of the shops on that street. Nearby shopkeepers and passing pedestrians immediately rushed to help. Her name was Nazanin. She was in such bad condition that she couldn't even explain what had happened. The only thing people could do was call emergency services and ask for help. Before the ambulance arrived to take Nazanin to the hospital, while people were gathered around her, the phone inside her bag suddenly rang. One of the women there answered it. On the line was Maryam, Nazanin's sister, who seemed to somehow sense that something had happened to her sister, and that's why she had called to check on her. When a stranger answered, the woman who picked up the phone explained what was going on and told Maryam that her sister was not well, was in a very critical condition, unconscious, and they were waiting for the ambulance to take her to the hospital. The woman also gave Maryam her own phone number so they could stay in contact and so she could guide her to the right hospital near Islamshahr. When the ambulance arrived, they immediately transferred Nazanin to the hospital. But as I said, she was completely unconscious. Her face and neck were covered in bruises, signs that she had been severely beaten. It could even be guessed that whoever had attacked her had done so with the intent to kill, but Nazanin had managed to escape. In any case, after she was taken to the hospital, despite all the efforts of the medical staff to keep her alive, Nazanin ultimately died there due to the severe injuries to her head and face and the heavy internal bleeding. Now the question was, who could have done something so horrific to Nazanin? To answer that, let's go back a bit and talk about Nazanin herself, her relationship with her husband and her family, then return to this point in the story. Nazanin was a 30-year-old young woman who took on the heavy burdens of life very early. At 18, at the age when her peers were pursuing education, she was sent to her husband's home through a traditional family decision. She married a man named Salar. They had 2 children, one was about 10 years old at the time of the incident, and the other was much younger. This younger child played a major role in the decisions Nazanin later made. In the early years of their marriage, Nazanin and Salar had a good relationship. Everything seemed stable. But after a while, their life gradually fell into unbelievable crises that ultimately crushed everything. It was said that Salar was hot-tempered and aggressive, constantly fighting with Nazanin, and whenever they argued, he would beat her. As time went on, the violence and the beatings escalated. You've surely heard the saying that arguments between spouses are the spice of life. I agree with that to some extent, because in many cases these conflicts are just misunderstandings. But what existed between Nazanin and Salar was not normal at all. This man was dangerous. He hit her. Nazanin would often leave after these fights and go to her parents' house, hoping for support. But unfortunately, she wasn't truly supported there either. Her parents and elders would talk to her and eventually persuade her to return to that house, to that hell, without realizing that this lack of support could lead to a catastrophe. And it wasn't only Salar's violence. He was also a womanizer who would cheat on Nazanin whenever he had the chance. And Nazanin was somewhat aware of it. In this situation, the only person who truly knew Nazanin's heartbreak was her sister, Maryam. The same Maryam who had called on the day of the incident. Maryam listened, tried to be her confidant, comforted her, and encouraged her. But the beatings and humiliation became so severe that Nazanin had reportedly made serious attempts more than once to end her life, each time unsuccessfully because those around her saved her. This life continued like that until other events occurred, events that delivered the final blow. From her teenage years, Nazanin had a close friend named Foro. They remained close even after both married, and their relationship became family visits. Nazanin never imagined that after her husband, the final blow would come from this very friend, Foro, who, despite being married, was responding positively to Salar's signals for a secret relationship. You may ask, how could that happen? It can be assumed that during gatherings at Nazanin and Salar's home, when Nazanin would go to the kitchen to prepare things, or when Foro's husband went to the restroom or stepped outside to smoke, Salar used those moments to get close to Foro. And in one of those gatherings, he told her he loved her, more than his own wife Nazanin. It's unclear how Foro convinced herself to respond positively to the husband of her closest friend. But whatever it was, after they had been in a relationship for a while, Salar even proposed marriage to Foro. For that to happen, both would have needed to separate from their spouses. Foro would divorce her husband, and Salar would divorce Nazanin. At that time, Nazanin, who had no confidant except Miriam, would cry to her every day, talk about her problems, and describe her husband's dark plans. Miriam told her she should stand firm and not back down, unaware that this resistance could become the last scene of Nazanin's life. Salar was doing everything he could to pressure Nazanin into divorce so he could reach Foro. On the other side, Foro was stuck in an ethical and traditional dead end, caught between Salar's temptations and her fear of facing her family, with no clear reason or courage to leave her husband. The painful, dark point is that while all this was happening, Nazanin tasted motherhood for the second time. With her younger child in her arms, she tried to keep her life from collapsing. She was in the worst psychological and physical condition. Her life was truly hell, yet she kept trying to talk to Salar and bring him back to the family. But there was no listening. Salar was obsessed with Foro and would do anything to get her. And it's strange how others didn't notice. These four, Salar, Foro, Miriam, and Nazanin, kept it hidden, or rather, Salar and Foro were being deceitful, while Miriam and Nazanin likely stayed silent to preserve honor. In any case, this went on until we reached the day of the incident. The day Nazanin, shattered, walked into the street, staggering in front of shops, and collapsed. And then what I described happened. After Nazanin's death, it became clear to everyone what had happened. There was no need for investigators to look far. The bruises told the story. And here Miriam, who had stayed silent for the sake of appearances until that day, broke her silence, pointed at Salar and said, "Whatever happened to her sister, the one responsible was her brother-in-law." Miriam said that before Nazanin died, she had told Miriam everything that had been happening. Miriam was her secret box. When she spoke to the officers, she revealed Salar's secret relationship with Foro in detail, shared Nazanin's pain, and emphasized that just one day before the incident, Nazanin had vowed she no longer wanted to be a victim and intended to stand firmly against Salar's bullying. Miriam said she had warned Nazanin that it could be dangerous and asked her to wait a little longer, but Nazanin could no longer endure and said she wanted to talk to him. From a psychological perspective, in situations like this, you shouldn't confront men like that head-on because they can be extremely dangerous, especially when they feel their power is being challenged. That was exactly the case with Salar. After Miriam's statements, officers quickly went after Salar, arrested him, and took him in handcuffs to the Islamshahr police station. They asked him to explain Miriam's claims and his secret relationship with Foro. At first, Salar denied it and said it was all an accusation, but he didn't know the officers had already obtained the records of calls and messages between him and Foro. When they put them in front of him, he had no way to deny it. He admitted he was in a relationship with Foro, but he did not admit he had caused his wife's death. To avoid the accusation, he pointed to Nazanin's previous failed suicide attempts and claimed she had mental problems, and that everyone knew she had tried to kill herself many times in the past. He said this last time, she harmed herself so badly that she couldn't survive. He also said that although they had severe fights because of the Foro issue, he never wanted it to end like this. His only goal was a clean separation from Nazanin to reach Foro. He even tried to use their 10-year-old son as a witness. The boy said his parents argued that day, but he didn't see his father hit his mother. He said his mother's stomach hurt. She said she was going to get medicine, and when she left the house, he saw her get into a car and leave. Then he knew nothing until they heard she had died in the hospital. The question then was whether Salar had dictated this false scenario to the child so the story would benefit him. The legal medicine report made it very clear. Nazanin's death was caused by very severe blows to vital organs, blows that tore vessels in her neck and even her brain, causing heavy internal bleeding. So when Nazanin told her son her stomach hurt and she was going to get stomach medicine from neighbors, that wasn't true. She didn't want her child to realize what his father had done. She left, got into a car to escape that situation, but her condition was so bad that she collapsed on the street and later died in the hospital. In the trial, Nazanin's family requested qisas, retribution, but Salar shamelessly told the story in a way and used the testimony of his 10-year-old son that the judges became doubtful and he managed to get acquitted. But as Miriam later told him, "Don't die yet. Spring is coming. Cucumbers will come with yogurt." Miriam didn't allow her sister's blood to be trampled like that. She appealed the verdict, and the case went to the Supreme Court of Iran. There, judges reviewed the legal medicine reports more carefully and saw that the hand marks on the neck and the internal bleeding did not match a suicide story. So they ordered the case to be reopened and reviewed again. This didn't happen quickly. It took 7 years for things to reach that point. During those 7 years, Salar was free. He went to Ahar and managed to set up an armed robbery gang. Right around the time Miriam succeeded in getting the case moving again, he was arrested in a Hollywood-style operation after a gold shop robbery and sent to prison, and he received 15 years in prison for that case. People who don't fear the law, like Salar, are ruthless. Otherwise, after escaping punishment for his wife's death, he would have repented and lived as a father, taking care of his children, not forming an armed gang. He thought he could break the law again and not get caught, but he forgot Miriam's words. This time the punishment was heavy. According to Islamic law and the laws of Iran, when a person is murdered, the victim's family has the right to demand qisas, retributive justice, or to forgo qisas and instead request financial compensation, known as diya, blood money. The choice rests entirely with the family of the victim. However, this process changes under specific circumstances, particularly when the perpetrator is a man and the victim is a woman. Under Islamic law, the amount of diya assigned to a woman is half of the amount designated for an adult man. This legal distinction directly affects cases in which the victim's family seeks qisas. In this case, for Nazanin's family to be able to carry out the sentence of qisas, they were required by law to pay half of the diya of an adult man to Salar's family. Only after this payment could the sentence of qisas be legally executed. This meant that despite being the victim's family and despite seeking justice for a brutal and fatal assault, Nazanin's relatives first had to bear a heavy financial burden simply to make the enforcement of justice possible. Nazanin's family said that despite their financial difficulties, they managed to provide the difference required for diya so that justice could be carried out and Salar could face qisas. Now we have to wait and see whether this time he truly faces decisive justice. But I believe, with the precise legal medicine reports and the clear picture of what kind of man Salar is, the qisas sentence will be carried out. Friends, these were all the details of this case. Thank you for staying with me to the end. Please write your opinions in the comments. Take care of yourselves. Until another criminal case, goodbye.